My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am 26 years old. By day, or rather, by the fake life my family thinks I lead, I am a struggling waitress barely making ends meet. In reality, I am a Master of Finance graduate and the newly appointed Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions for Titan Real Estate, one of the largest investment firms in Chicago. But nobody knows that yet, especially not the two women who just walked through the front door of the Gilded Spoon. It was Mother's Day 2026. The brunch rush was in full swing, a chaotic symphony of clinking silverware popping champagne corks, and the low roar of families pretending to get along for 2 hours. I was balancing a tray of mimosas and eggs, Benedict my feet aching in cheap non-slip shoes. This was supposed to be my final shift. I had kept this job for 6 months longer than necessary, mostly to maintain the illusion, but also because there is a certain invisibility to being a server that I found useful. You hear things. You see who people really are when they think no one important is watching. The bell above the door chimed, cutting through the noise. I did not need to look up to know who it was. The scent of Chanel No. 5 and desperation drifted over the hostess stand. It was my mother, Linda, and my younger sister, Jessica. They looked like $1 million, or at least what people with maxed-out credit cards think $1 million looks like. Linda was wearing a pastel suit that was a little too tight, her hair sprayed into an immobile helmet of blonde. Jessica, the golden child, was draped in a silk dress that probably cost more than my car, tapping away on her phone with a bored expression that she had perfected since high school. My stomach dropped, but not out of fear. It was that old familiar reflex of shame that I had been conditioned to feel for 2 decades. I adjusted my grip on the tray and tried to weave through the tables toward the kitchen, hoping to swap sections with another server. I was not ready for this. Not today. Sarah. The voice was like a whip crack. It was not a greeting. It was an accusation. I froze. The entire section seemed to quiet down. I turned slowly, plastering on my customer service smile, the one that didn't reach my eyes. Hello, Mother. Hello, Jessica. Linda stood in the center of the aisle, blocking the path of a busboy. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my stained apron, my messy bun, and the tray of food in my hands. She let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. Oh my God. She turned to the table of well-dressed strangers next to her, gesturing at me as if I were an exhibit in a zoo. We did not realize you worked here. How embarrassing for us. Jessica looked up from her phone smirking. She didn't even say hello. She just rolled her eyes and muttered, God, Sarah, could you be any more tragic? I just got an internship at Vogue. Unpaid, obviously, but the connections are priceless. Meanwhile, you are doing this. Linda sighed loud enough for 3 tables to hear. It is fine, Jessica. Someone in the family has to be the failure so you can shine brighter. It provides contrast. I felt the heat rise up my neck. My hands shook the glasses on my tray, rattling against each other. I could see the pity in the eyes of the customers at table 4. I could see the confusion on the face of the new hostess. But mostly I saw the absolute unadulterated malice in my mother's eyes. She enjoyed this. She loved seeing me small. She loved having a public audience for her cruelty. In the past, the old Sarah would have shrunk away. I would have apologized for existing. I would have run to the bathroom to cry. But the Sarah standing there today was different. I was not just a waitress anymore. I was the person who had spent the last 3 weeks analyzing the financial distressed assets of this very building. I walked over to their table. I set the tray down on a nearby service stand with a deliberate clatter. I picked up a menu, walked right up to Linda's face, and smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. A smile that terrified her, though she didn't know why yet. I leaned in close so only she and Jessica and the nosy couple at the next table could hear. I locked eyes with her and said 5 words. I am the landlord now. Linda blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Excuse me? I signaled to Steve, the general manager, who had been hovering nervously near the bar. He had been briefed on the acquisition yesterday. He knew exactly who I was. He rushed over, sweat beading on his forehead. Steve. I said, my voice calm and authoritative. These guests are disrupting the atmosphere. Please escort them out." Steve nodded vigorously. "Yes, Ms. Jenkins. Immediately." He turned to my mother, his face stern. "Ma'am, the owner of the building has requested that we reclaim this table. You need to leave." "But," Linda stammered, looking from me to Steve and back again. "She is just a waitress. She is my daughter. She is lying." "I am not just a waitress, Linda," I said, dropping the mom. "And you are trespassing." Jessica gasped, finally dropping her phone. "Sarah, what is going on? You are embarrassing us." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed freely in their presence in years. "No, Jessica. I think you will find that getting kicked out of the finest brunch spot in Chicago because you insulted the owner is what is embarrassing. Now get out." Steve stepped forward, gesturing to the door. Security was already moving toward us. Linda turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She grabbed her purse, shooting me a look of pure hatred, and stormed out, dragging a confused Jessica behind her. The restaurant fell silent for a beat, and then slowly the hum of conversation returned. I looked at Steve. "I am done for the day, Steve. Put my tips in the jar for the kitchen staff." "Yes, Ms. Jenkins." "Thank you, Ms. Jenkins." I untied my apron. As the fabric fell away from my waist, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that had been there since I was 18 years old. I was shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. It was the intoxicating taste of justice. Before I tell you what happened when I walked out those doors, and the secret I had been keeping for 8 years, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps share these stories with people who need to know they are not alone. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where you finally stood up to a bully in your family? I want to hear your story. I walked out of the Gilded Spoon, the cool spring air hitting my face. I could see Linda's car peeling out of the parking lot, nearly clipping a valet. I took a deep breath. My hands were still trembling slightly as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my car keys. I walked past the row of luxury SUVs and convertibles to the far back of the lot where my rusted, dented 2016 Honda Civic was parked. It was a poetic contrast, the owner of the building driving a car that sounded like a lawnmower. But this car was my badge of honor. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, and let the mask drop. The tears came then, hot and fast, not because I missed them, but because of what they had taken from me to get here. I looked at the passenger seat. There was my leather portfolio. Sticking out of it was my new business card. Sarah Jenkins, Vice President, Titan Real Estate. It felt surreal. But to understand why that card meant more to me than a winning lottery ticket, you have to understand where the money for that Honda Civic came from and where the money for Jessica's BMW went. Let me take you back 8 years. I was 18. I had just been accepted to the University of Chicago with a partial scholarship. I had worked every summer, every weekend since I was 14, babysitting, mowing lawns, scrubbing floors. I had saved $40,000. It was in a joint account with my mother because I was a minor when I opened it. That money was my freedom. It was my tuition, my dorm room, my escape from the house where I was always the mistake and Jessica was always the miracle. I remember walking into the bank the day before tuition was due. I was so proud. I handed the teller my slip. She typed for a moment, then frowned. She typed again. "Miss Jenkins," she said, her voice soft. "There is only $5 in this account." I thought I was going to pass out. The room spun. "No, that is impossible. There is $40,000. I saved it." The teller turned the screen around. A withdrawal had been made 2 days prior. By Linda Jenkins. I drove home in a panic. I found Linda and Jessica in the driveway. There was a brand new white BMW convertible with a giant red bow on the hood. Jessica was screaming with delight, jumping up and down. Linda was beaming, holding the keys. "Mom," I choked out. "My money," the bank said. Linda didn't even look guilty. She looked annoyed that I was ruining the moment. "Oh, Sarah, don't be dramatic." Jessica needed a reliable car for college. "She is going to state school. The campus is huge. You know how delicate she is. She can't be walking everywhere." "But that was my tuition," I whispered. "That was my life." "You are smart, Sarah. Linda said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. You will figure it out. Get a loan or a job. Jessica is not as scrappy as you. She needs help. Besides, I am your mother. The money in that account was technically mine. I stood there watching my sister caress the leather seats of the car bought with my sweat and tears. Jessica looked at me and giggled. Thanks for the ride, sis. That was the day the old Sarah died. I didn't go to the University of Chicago that year. I couldn't afford it. I went to community college. I worked 3 jobs. I waited tables at the Gilded Spoon. I took out loans with predatory interest rates. I ate ramen noodles for 4 years. I missed parties. I missed sleep. I missed having a youth. But I learned something. I learned that my mother did not love me. She viewed me as a resource, a battery to be drained to power Jessica's life. And I learned that if I wanted to survive, I had to stop being a daughter and start being a strategist. I studied finance not because I loved numbers, but because I wanted to understand how people like my mother operated. I wanted to understand power. I graduated top of my class, not that they came to the ceremony. Linda said it was too far to drive, even though it was 20 minutes away. I got my master's at night while working shifts at the restaurant during the day. I lived in a basement apartment that flooded every time it rained. I drove this rusted Honda. And every month I sent Linda a small check for rent on a room I didn't live in anymore, just to keep them from asking questions, to keep them thinking I was still under their thumb, still the pathetic waitress Sarah. Silence was my weapon. I never told them about my grades. I never told them about the internships I secured. And I certainly never told them about the job offer from Titan. Titan Real Estate is not just a company. It is a predator. We buy failing commercial properties, strip them of bad management, and turn them into gold mines. 2 months ago, my boss, Mr. Sterling, threw a file on my desk. The Gilded Spoon building, he said. The ownership group is bankrupt. They are defaulting on 3 mortgages. We can pick it up for pennies on the dollar if we move fast. I opened the file. I knew every crack in the ceiling of that building. I knew the plumbing was bad in the ladies' room. I knew the kitchen vents needed replacing. But I also knew the location was prime. I will handle this deal, I told him. Mr. Sterling looked at me. He knew my background. He knew I had worked there. Are you sure, Sarah? It might be personal. It is strictly business, I lied. It took 6 weeks of negotiations. I used a shell company name so the current owners wouldn't recognize me. I pushed through the paperwork. I secured the financing. And yesterday morning, the deed was transferred. The building, the land, and the lease of the restaurant itself now belonged to Titan. And as the project lead, I was the acting authority. I sat in my car wiping my eyes. The flashback faded. I was back in the parking lot. I looked at the business card again. I pulled out my phone. I had 5 missed calls from Linda. She was probably calling to demand I fix this, to demand I get Steve fired, or maybe to ask for money to pay for the brunch they hadn't eaten. I blocked her number. I started the car. The engine sputtered and then roared to life. I was not going back to my basement apartment. Today was moving day. I had signed a lease on a loft downtown. A loft with a doorman, a gym, and a view of the lake. But this wasn't over. Not even close. The incident at the restaurant was just the opening shot. Linda and Jessica didn't know it yet, but they were sitting on a time bomb. You see, in my work at Titan, I have access to public records, deep records. While researching the Gilded Spoon deal, I had run a background check on my own family just to be thorough. I wanted to make sure there were no financial liabilities attached to my name. What I found was not just bad credit, it was criminal. Linda had not just stolen my college fund. That was small potatoes. I found documents showing that the family home, the house I grew up in, the house my father had paid off before he died, was currently leveraged to the hilt. Linda had taken out 3 separate home equity lines of credit. She had forged my father's signature on documents dated after his death. She had been living off the house's equity for a decade, funding Jessica's lifestyle and her own delusions of grandeur. And the kicker: the bank was foreclosing. They had sent the final notice last week. Linda was trying to sell the house. I knew this because I saw the listing online. but she couldn't sell it with the liens on it. She was looking for a cash buyer, someone stupid enough to hand over money without doing a title search. She was planning to take the cash and run before the bank locked the doors. I put the car in gear. I wasn't just the landlord of the restaurant. My division at Titan also specialized in acquiring distressed residential debt. I wasn't going to let some random stranger buy my childhood home. And I certainly wasn't going to let Linda commit fraud and vanish with the money. I dialed a number on my car's Bluetooth. Liam, I said. Liam was my attorney. He was also the only man I had ever dated who didn't run away when I told him about my family. Hey, Sarah? Happy Mother's Day, he said, his voice dry. How did it go? It went exactly as planned, I said. But we need to move to phase 2. Is the paperwork ready for the house? It is on my desk, Liam replied. But Sarah, are you sure? Once we file this, there is no going back. You are essentially evicting your own mother. I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the restaurant fading into the distance. I saw the ghost of the 18-year-old girl crying in the driveway while her sister laughed in a new BMW. I am sure, Liam. She evicted me from her heart the day she stole my future. I am just returning the favor. Put in the offer, but use the LLC name. I don't want her to know it is me. Not until the ink is dry. Copy that. We are making an offer on the Jenkins residence. I hung up. The road ahead was clear. I was going to buy my mother's house out from under her. I was going to be the one to save it from the bank. And when she found out who her savior was, it was going to destroy her. But I didn't know then that Linda had one more trick up her sleeve. I didn't know that Jessica was not just a spoiled brat, but a dangerous one. And I certainly didn't expect that by the end of the week the police would be involved. As I merged onto the highway heading toward my new life, I allowed myself one small cold thought. Class is in session, mother, and I am the teacher. This is only the beginning. The real war starts when money changes hands. If you want to know what Linda did when she received an offer that seemed too good to be true, and how Jessica tried to ruin my career before it even started, you need to stay tuned for the next part. Trust me, you won't believe the lies they told the real estate agent. To understand the woman who just bought a commercial building to silence a bully, you have to meet the girl who scrubbed floors just to buy school lunch. You have to go back to the suburbs of Chicago to a house that looked perfect from the street, but was rotting from the inside out. My story. The real story began 12 years ago when my father died of a sudden heart attack. When they lowered his casket into the ground, I felt like I was watching my only shield against the world disappear. Dad was the only one who ever looked at me and saw a person, not a utility. He left behind a substantial life insurance policy. It was enough money to secure our future, to pay off the mortgage and to send both Jessica and me to college. But my mother Linda saw that check differently. She didn't see it as a safety net. She saw it as venture capital. And in her twisted business model, I was the overhead costs and Jessica was the high-risk, high-reward asset. Linda was obsessed with appearances. She believed that a woman's only value lay in her ability to attract a wealthy provider. Jessica, with her blonde curls and doll-like face, was the perfect candidate. I was different. I was quiet, bookish, and plain. I was sturdy. Linda loved that word. Sarah is sturdy, she would say to her friends. It was not a compliment. It meant I was built for labor, not for display. 6 months after Dad died, the spending began. It started with beauty pageants for Jessica. Then it was private coaching modeling classes and a wardrobe that rivaled a Hollywood starlet's. Linda would drag me along to the mall, forcing me to carry the bags while Jessica tried on $300 jeans. I was wearing shoes with holes in the soles, but Linda said we couldn't afford new sneakers for me because Jessica needed headshots for a casting call in New York. I remember asking my mother once why I couldn't have piano lessons like I had always wanted. She looked at me while applying lipstick in the rearview mirror and said simply that piano lessons wouldn't help me find a husband, so it was a bad return on investment. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a daughter to her. I was an employee in the business of making Jessica a star. By the time I was 14, the insurance money was draining fast, but the lifestyle didn't change. The bills started piling up on the kitchen counter. Notices in red ink. Final warnings. One afternoon in February, I came home from school to find the house freezing. I could see my breath in the living room. The furnace was off. The lights wouldn't turn on. Linda and Jessica were gone. They were in Florida for a cheerleading competition. They had flown out that morning, leaving me behind with a fridge full of expired milk and no electricity. I called my mother, shivering in my coat. "Mom, the power is out," I said, my teeth chattering. "Oh, I must have forgotten to mail the check," she said breezily, as if she were talking about forgetting to buy bread. "Just handle it, Sarah. You are so resourceful. I can't deal with this right now. Jessica is having a crisis about her hair ribbon." She hung up. I sat in the dark, cold kitchen and cried for 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face. I walked 2 miles to the local diner, the Gilded Spoon, the very same restaurant I would later own. I lied about my age. I told the manager I was 16. I begged for a job washing dishes. He took pity on me. I worked until midnight, my hands raw and red from the scalding water and industrial soap. I took my first paycheck and paid the electric bill. When Linda came home a week later, tan and relaxed, she didn't even ask how I got the lights back on. She just assumed I had taken care of it. That became the dynamic. I worked evenings and weekends. I bought my own clothes. I bought my own food. And eventually, I started paying the water bill and the internet bill too. Because if I didn't, they would get cut off and Linda would scream at me for being irresponsible. It sounds insane that a 14-year-old was subsidizing a 40-year-old woman, but I did it because I was desperate for her approval. I thought that if I was useful enough, if I solved enough problems, if I made her life easy enough, she would finally love me. I thought I could buy her affection with my labor. I was essentially paying rent for the privilege of being ignored. I studied by candlelight to save electricity. I finished my homework on the bus because I was too tired after my shifts. And through it all, I maintained a 4.0 GPA. School was my exit strategy. I knew that if I could just get into a top-tier university, I could escape. I could build a life where my worth wasn't determined by how much I could sacrifice for Jessica. The acceptance letter came on a rainy Tuesday in April. I saw the thick envelope in the mailbox and my heart stopped. University of Chicago. I tore it open right there in the driveway, the rain soaking my hair. Accepted. I had done it. I had gotten into one of the most prestigious schools in the country. I ran inside, bursting with a joy I hadn't felt in years. "Mom," I shouted. "Mom, look." Linda was in the living room watching TV. Jessica was painting her nails on the couch. Linda took the letter from my shaking hands. She read it, her expression unreadable. "University of Chicago," she said flatly. "That is expensive, Sarah." "I have a partial scholarship," I explained, breathless. "It covers half the tuition. I just need to take out loans for the rest." "I need you to co-sign the student loans, Mom. I can work to pay them off, but I need a co-signer because I have no credit history." Linda dropped the letter on the coffee table next to a stack of fashion magazines. "No," she said. I froze. "What do you mean?" "No, I mean I am not signing anything," she replied, turning her attention back to the TV. "But Mom," I pleaded, falling to my knees beside her chair. "This is my dream. I worked so hard for this. I just need your signature. I will pay every cent. You won't have to pay a dime." Linda sighed, a sound of immense irritation. "Sarah, listen to me. I am planning to refinance the house soon to get some equity out for Jessica's launch party in Los Angeles. If I co-sign a massive student loan for you, it will show up as debt on my credit report. It will lower my FICO score. I can't risk my credit rating just so you can go read books for 4 years." I stared at her. I couldn't breathe. "You are worried about your credit score. You spent Dad's insurance money on a BMW for Jessica. You let me pay the electric bill since I was 14. And you won't sign a piece of paper so I can have a future." "Don't be selfish," Jessica chimed in, blowing on her nails. "Mom is doing this for the family. My career is about to take off. You can just go to community college. It is the same thing, isn't it?" Something broke inside me that day. It wasn't just my heart. It was the illusion. The illusion that I had a mother. The illusion that if I was good enough, I would be rewarded. I realized then that to Linda, I wasn't a daughter. I was an obstacle. I was a threat to her credit score, a drain on her resources that were earmarked for her golden child. I stood up. I didn't cry. I was done crying. I picked up my acceptance letter from the table. It was wet from the rain and crinkled. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay." Linda looked at me surprised by my lack of a fight. "You understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. I walked out of the room. I didn't go to the University of Chicago that fall. I couldn't get the loans without a cosigner. Instead, I enrolled in the local community college because it was cheap enough to pay out of pocket. That was when the real grind began. I took a morning shift at a bakery from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. I went to classes from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then I worked the dinner shift at the Gilded Spoon from 4 p.m. to midnight. I slept an average of 3 hours a night. I did my reading during my breaks, hiding my textbooks under the counter so the customers wouldn't see. I became a ghost in my own house. I stopped eating dinner with them. I stopped telling them about my day. I stopped asking for anything. I saved every penny that didn't go to tuition. I opened a secret bank account that Linda didn't know about. For 4 years, I watched Jessica sleep in until noon. I watched her fly to Miami and New York on Linda's credit cards. I watched them laugh and drink wine while I came home smelling like grease and exhaustion. But I never complained. Not once. Because I was building something. I was building a wall of financial independence brick by brick, dollar by dollar. I learned to view my life as a balance sheet. Linda and Jessica were liabilities. My education and my savings were assets. And I swore to myself that one day the balance would shift. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew that one day I would have the power. I just never imagined that the power would come in the form of a foreclosure notice on the very house where they told me I wasn't worth a signature. But before we get to the foreclosure, you need to understand the depth of the deception. You need to know what I found when I started digging into the public records during my lunch breaks at the real estate firm where I finally landed an internship. What I found made the student loan refusal look like an act of kindness. Because while I was working 3 jobs to pay for community college, Linda was quietly stealing my identity to keep her sinking ship afloat. The engine of my Honda Civic was still idling in the parking lot of the Gilded Spoon, vibrating against my palms as I gripped the steering wheel. The flashback to my college years had left me breathless, a cold sweat pricking at my hairline. But the past was about to collide violently with the present. My phone sitting in the cup holder lit up. The screen flashed a picture of a golden retriever puppy, an old contact photo I had set for my mother years ago when I still desperately wanted to believe she was soft and loyal. Now the name Linda pulsed on the screen like a warning siren. I stared at it. Part of me, the part that was still the scared little girl in the dark kitchen, wanted to let it go to voicemail. I wanted to drive away, change my number, and disappear into my new life as a high-powered executive. But I knew Linda. If I didn't answer, she would show up at my basement apartment. She would cause a scene. She would hunt me down. I took a deep breath, swiped right, and put the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I didn't have to. "You ungrateful, spiteful little brat." Linda's voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It wasn't the voice of a mother. It was the shriek of a woman who had been publicly unmasked. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she screamed. "Do you have any idea who was at that restaurant? The vice president of the junior league was 2 tables away. 2 tables, Sarah. And you have me thrown out like I am some sort of vagrant." I stared out the windshield at a seagull pecking at a discarded French fry. "I am not a waitress anymore, Linda," I said, my voice calm, almost robotic. "I told you. I am the landlord." "Oh, stop it with the lies," she hissed. "You are delusional. You are probably sleeping with the manager or doing drugs. That is the only explanation for that stunt. You humiliated your sister." Jessica is crying in the car. She is hyperventilating. She has a casting call tomorrow for a reality show, and now her eyes are going to be puffy. I felt a dry laugh bubble up in my chest. Of course. It always circled back to Jessica. "I am hanging up now, Linda," I said. "No, you are not," she snapped. "You are going to listen to me. Since you clearly have no respect for this family and since you seem to think you are so independent with your imaginary landlord powers, I have news for you. Real news." I waited. The silence on the line was heavy loaded with the promise of pain. "We are selling the house," Linda said. My heart stopped. The house. 42 Oak Creek Drive. The white colonial with the black shutters. The house my father had bought 25 years ago. The house where I had grown up, where I had hidden in the attic to read, where Dad had taught me to ride a bike in the driveway. What I whispered. "We are selling it," she repeated, her tone shifting from anger to a smug satisfaction. "Jessica has a brilliant business idea. She is launching her own fashion line. J-style. It is going to be massive, Sarah. Influencers are already interested, but we need capital for the launch. We need liquid cash for inventory and marketing. So I am selling the house. We are downsizing to a condo in the city, something chic, and using the equity to fund Jessica's dream." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You can't sell the house," I said, my voice rising. "Dad's things are in the attic. My childhood journals. My books. Everything I left behind when I moved out because I didn't have room in the basement." "Oh, that junk," Linda scoffed. "We are throwing all that out. We hired a skip. It is coming tomorrow morning. If you want your dusty old paperbacks, you better come dig them out of the dumpster. We are listing the house for a quick cash sale on Friday." "You are selling the house to fund a fashion line for Jessica." I asked, the absurdity of it hitting me like a physical blow. Jessica has never sewn a button in her life. "She is the creative director," Sarah Linda said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You wouldn't understand vision. You just understand wiping tables. Anyway, consider this your notice. You are officially cut off. Not that you were ever really part of this family to begin with." The line went dead. I sat there for a full minute, the silence of the car pressing in on me. She was selling my father's legacy. She was taking the only thing he had left us, the roof over our heads, and liquefying it to pour into another one of Jessica's vanity projects. But then the fog of emotion cleared and the analyst in me took over. Something didn't add up. I knew the real estate market in our neighborhood. Houses on Oak Creek Drive didn't just sell for quick cash unless there was something wrong. And Linda had mentioned equity. She spoke as if the house was a piggy bank she could just smash open. But I remembered the years of lavish spending. The BMWs, the trips to Cabo, the designer clothes. Where did that money come from? Linda hadn't worked a day in 20 years. I threw the car into reverse. I wasn't going to my new apartment. I was going to the office. I needed a computer. I needed access to the Titan database. 20 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of the Titan real estate tower. The security guard, Mike, nodded at me. "Good afternoon, Ms. Jenkins." Working on a Sunday, I didn't even smile. "Urgent business, Mike." I took the elevator to the 40th floor. The office was empty, a vast expanse of glass and polished steel. I walked into my new office, the one with the view of the Chicago River, and sat down at my desk. I woke up my computer. The screens glowed blue, illuminating the room. I didn't log into the standard MLS listings. I logged into Titan's proprietary risk assessment software. It was a tool we used to investigate distressed assets, a program that pulled data from county clerks, tax assessors, and banking records all over the state. It was a tool designed to find the truth that people tried to hide. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I typed in the address. 42 Oak Creek Drive. The system buffered for a second, then populated the screen with a web of data points. I leaned closer, my eyes scanning the lines. As I read, a cold knot formed in my stomach. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just bad financial management. It was a catastrophe. The screen showed the mortgage history. Line 1, original mortgage. Lender, First National Bank. Amount $300,000. Status, paid in full. 2014. That was Dad. He had paid off the house 2 years before he died. He wanted us to be safe. Line 2. Home equity. Line of credit, HELOC, lender Chase. Date 2018. Amount $150,000. Status maxed out. This was the year Jessica wanted to go to Europe to find herself. Line 3, second mortgage. Lender Wells Fargo. Date 2021. Amount $200,000. Status default. This was the year Jessica got a DUI, and they hired a celebrity lawyer to make it go away. Line 4, high-interest personal loan secured by property. Lender Quick Cash LLC. Date 2024. Amount $75,000. Interest rate 18%. Status 90 days past due. I stared at the numbers. The house was worth maybe $600,000 in the current market. Linda had leveraged it for nearly $500,000. There was no equity. There was no profit to be made. If she sold the house today after closing costs and paying off the liens, she would walk away with nothing. Or worse, she would owe money. So why was she talking about funding a fashion line? I scrolled down to the bottom of the page to the section marked Legal Status. The text was read. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. Auction date scheduled June 15, 2026. I sat back in my chair, covering my mouth with my hand. Linda wasn't selling the house because she wanted to downsize. She was losing the house. The bank had finally had enough. They were taking it back. But Linda had said she was listing it for a quick cash sale on Friday. I closed my eyes, thinking like a criminal, thinking like the con artists I tracked down for a living. If the bank is foreclosing in June, Linda still technically holds the title until the gavel bangs at the auction. If she can find a naive investor, someone who buys houses for cash without doing a thorough title search or purchasing title insurance, she can sell the house next week. She can take the cash payment, let's say $400,000, for a quick sale. She pockets the $400,000. She gives the deed to the buyer. Then 3 weeks later, the bank shows up to seize the house because the liens were never paid. The new buyer loses the house. The bank takes the property. And Linda, she is gone. She is in Mexico or the Caribbean with Jessica and $400,000 of stolen money. It wasn't just a sale. It was fraud. It was a felony. She was planning to scam a stranger to fund her getaway. I looked at the documents on the screen. I saw the digital copy of the deed transfer for the second mortgage. I zoomed in on the signature line. Harold Jenkins. My father's name. Signed in 2021. My father died in 2014. The room spun. She hadn't just taken loans out in her own name. She had forged my dead father's signature to bypass the credit checks, likely claiming he was still alive, or using old power of attorney documents that should have expired upon death. She had been committing identity theft against her own husband for a decade. I felt a wave of nausea. This was the woman who worried about her FICO score when I needed student loans. She was a criminal mastermind of the most pathetic variety. I printed everything. The printer whirred in the quiet office, spitting out page after page of evidence. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let this happen. I couldn't let her scam an innocent buyer. And I couldn't let my father's house, the one place where I had felt safe, be lost to a bank auction or a scam. But I also saw an opportunity. A cruel, poetic opportunity. Linda was looking for a cash buyer. She needed someone with liquid assets who could move fast. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Someone she could manipulate. She didn't know that Titan Real Estate had a subsidiary company, a shell corporation we used for anonymous acquisitions. It was called Phoenix Ventures. We used it to buy properties when we didn't want the seller to know a giant conglomerate was involved because that usually drove the price up. I picked up my office phone. I dialed the extension for the legal department. Liam picked up on the second ring. Sarah. It is Sunday. Why are you calling me from the office line, Liam? I said, my voice steady, staring at the stack of papers on my desk. I found a property I want Phoenix Ventures to acquire. Okay, Liam said, shifting into work mode. What is the address? 42 Oak Creek Drive, I said. There was a pause. Sarah, isn't that... Yes, I said. It is my mother's house. Sarah, we can't... Listen to me, Liam. She is trying to run a title fraud scam. She is facing foreclosure and trying to sell it for cash before the auction. I want to be the buyer. You want to buy a house that is underwater? Liam asked, confused. That is a bad investment. Not if we buy the debt first, I explained. I don't want to pay her. I want to contact Wells Fargo and Quick Cash, LLC, tomorrow morning. I want to buy the non-performing notes. I want to become the bank. I could hear Liam typing furiously. You want to buy the mortgage? So you become the lender. Exactly. I want to own the debt. And then I want to approach her as a cash buyer for the equity. I want her to sign the sales contract to Phoenix Ventures. I want her to think she has gotten away with it. I want her to think she has scammed a stupid company out of $500,000. And then Liam asked, his voice low. And then I said, watching the sun begin to set over the city, turning the river into a ribbon of blood-orange fire. Then when she shows up to collect the check, I want to be the one sitting at the head of the table. I want to be the one to tell her that the sale proceeds have been automatically applied to the debt she owes the lender. Which is me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. That is diabolical, Sarah Liam said finally. It is justice, I corrected. She forged Dad's signature, Liam. She stole his legacy. I am just taking it back. I will draw up the papers, Liam said. We can have the offer ready by Tuesday. Make it Monday, I said. She is desperate. She will sign anything if she thinks it is easy money. I hung up the phone. I looked at the picture of the house on the screen. It looked so innocent. A family home. A place where love should have lived. Now it was just a crime scene. I gathered the papers and placed them in my briefcase. I walked out of the office, the click of my heels echoing in the empty hallway. Linda wanted a war. She wanted to treat people like chess pieces. Fine. She was about to learn that she had been playing checkers while I had been mastering the game. I wasn't just the landlord of the restaurant anymore. By the end of the week, I was going to be the owner of her entire existence. And the best part? She was going to hand it to me on a silver platter, thinking she was the one holding the knife. I got back into my car and drove toward my new apartment. But first I made a detour. I drove past the house. 42 Oak Creek Drive. The lights were on. I could see shadows moving in the living room. Jessica was probably modeling her designs. Linda was probably calculating her imaginary millions. I parked across the street, hidden in the darkness. Enjoy it while it lasts, Mom, I whispered, because the landlord is coming home, and rent is due. The foreclosure notice I had printed out sat on the passenger seat beside me. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But I knew that confronting her with it now wouldn't be enough. She would deny it. She would cry. She would manipulate. No. I needed her to commit the act. I needed her to sign the papers attempting to sell the house fraudulently. I needed undeniable proof of her intent to defraud. Only then could I truly strip her of her power. Only then could I force her to face the consequences of a lifetime of selfishness. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the house in the rearview mirror. The game was set. The players were in position, and I was holding all the aces. But as I drove away, I didn't realize that Linda had already made a move I hadn't anticipated. She hadn't just listed the house. She had done something far more personal, something that would threaten my job at Titan before I could even execute my plan. The next morning, when I walked into my office, ready to initiate the purchase of her debt, I was met by the head of HR and 2 security guards. Sarah, the HR director, said, looking uncomfortable, "We received a disturbing email this morning regarding your ethics. We need you to hand over your badge." My blood ran cold. Linda. She had found a way to strike first. And if I lost my job, I lost the capital to buy the house. I lost everything. To find out what was in that email and how I turned a suspension into the ultimate trap, keep reading. The war had just gone nuclear. The glass doors of the Titan Global headquarters did not just open. They glided apart with a silent, expensive hush that sounded like money. For the first month of my employment, every time I walked through them, I instinctively checked my reflection to make sure I wasn't wearing an apron. I had to remind myself that the woman in the reflection wearing the tailored navy suit and the heels that clicked sharply against the marble floor was real. She was not a fraud. She was Sarah Jenkins, the vice president of distressed assets. My office was on the 40th floor. It was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Chicago River. From up here, the people on the street looked like ants. The cars looked like toys. And the Gilded Spoon, the restaurant where I had spent years being invisible, was just a speck in the distance. It was an intoxicating perspective. For the first time in my life, I was the one looking down. My job at Titan was specific and brutal. I was a hunter. My department specialized in buying bad debt. We looked for commercial properties businesses, and sometimes high-value residential estates that were drowning in financial mismanagement. We bought the mortgages from frustrated banks for pennies on the dollar, effectively becoming the new lender. Then we had two choices. We could restructure the loan to help the owner survive, or we could foreclose, take the property, and sell it for a massive profit. I was good at it, terrifyingly good. My boss, Mr. Sterling, said I had an instinct for weakness. He didn't know that my instinct was a survival mechanism honed by 26 years of living with Linda and Jessica. I could look at a balance sheet and see the lies hidden between the rows of numbers. I could read a CEO's desperate email and hear the same manipulative tone my mother used when she wanted money. I knew how to spot a sinking ship because I had been bailing water out of one my entire life. But navigating this shark tank required allies. That was how I met Liam. Liam Vance was the senior corporate counsel for Titan. He was 30 years old, with sharp features, messy brown hair that he constantly ran his hands through, and eyes that always looked tired but never missed a detail. We met during my second week over a stack of acquisition papers for a failing warehouse district. I had flagged a discrepancy in the environmental impact report that everyone else had missed. It was a small detail about groundwater contamination that could have cost the company millions in lawsuits. I brought the file to the legal department, bypassing 3 levels of middle management. Liam was sitting at his desk, surrounded by towers of paperwork. He looked up when I walked in, his expression guarded. "You must be the new shark Sterling hired," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Sarah, right. The one who jumped from hospitality to high finance without a safety net." I placed the file on his desk. "I prefer the term asset recovery specialist," I said coolly. "And you missed a clause on page 54 regarding the water table. If we buy this warehouse, we are buying a toxic waste cleanup bill." Liam blinked. He pulled the file toward him, flipped to page 54, and read. He was silent for a long moment. Then he looked up at me, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Well," he said, "you just saved my reputation and about $10 million. Can I buy you a coffee, or do you strictly drink the blood of your enemies?" That coffee turned into lunch, and lunch turned into a routine. Liam was different from the men I was used to. He came from a wealthy family, the kind with buildings named after them, but he hated the pretension. He saw the corporate world as a game one he played because he was good at it, not because he needed the validation. He was also the first person at Titan to figure out I was hiding something. It happened 3 weeks into our friendship. We were working late, ordering Thai food in the conference room. My phone had been buzzing incessantly on the table. It was Linda. I had ignored 5 calls. Liam watched the phone vibrate against the mahogany table. "You know," he said, poking at his pad thai, "most people answer their mothers, unless they owe them money, or unless they hate them." I looked at the screen. "It is complicated," I said. "Try me," Liam replied. "I am a lawyer. I thrive on complicated." I don't know why I told him. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, without judgment, just curious. So I told him. I told him about the tuition money, the BMW, the years of servitude. I told him about the restaurant incident and the 5 words I said to her. When I finished, I expected him to tell me to let it go. To tell me that family is family. That is what everyone else always said. But Liam didn't say that. He put down his fork, looked me in the eye, and said, "So when do we destroy them?" I laughed, surprised. I am working on it. But I need legal cover. I need to buy my childhood house, but I can't let them know it is me. If Linda sees my name on a contract, she will run. She will burn the house down out of spite before she lets me have it. That was when Liam became more than just a colleague. He became my accomplice. He set up Phoenix Ventures, LLC. He drafted the blind offers. He built the legal firewall that kept Sarah Jenkins, the waitress, separate from Sarah Jenkins, the vice president. We spent hours in his office mapping out the strategy. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about recovering my life. Liam understood the legal mechanics, but I understood the psychology. She will want a quick close, I told Liam one evening as we reviewed the foreclosure timeline. She is terrified of the bank auction. She needs cash to fund Jessica's fashion line launch party next month. If we offer cash, she won't read the fine print. You are betting a lot on her greed, Liam noted. I am betting on her arrogance, I corrected. She thinks she is the smartest person in the room. She thinks I'm a failure. That gap in her perception is where we win. And that was the hardest part. The acting. While I was closing multi-million-dollar deals by day, I had to maintain the persona of the struggling, unemployed waitress to my family. I couldn't let them see the new car I had bought, a modest upgrade but still too nice for a jobless girl. I couldn't let them see my clothes. I couldn't let them know where I lived. Linda made it easy in a way. She never asked where I was living. She assumed I was crashing on a friend's couch or living in a shelter. She didn't care as long as I wasn't asking her for money. But she did call. Oh, she called often, not to check on me, but to twist the knife. One afternoon, I was in the middle of a high-stakes negotiation with a group of investors from Tokyo. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped out of the boardroom, signaling to Liam to take over. I walked into the quiet hallway and answered. "Hello, Mother," Sarah Linda's voice chirped. It was her fake nice voice, the one she used when she wanted to brag. "I just wanted to let you know that Jessica's launch party is officially booked. We rented the ballroom at the Ritz. It is going to be spectacular." "That sounds expensive," I said, leaning against the glass wall, looking out at the skyline. "Quality costs money, Sarah," she snapped. "Something you would know if you had any ambition. By the way, I assume you are still unemployed since that little stunt at the restaurant." I closed my eyes, forcing my voice to tremble slightly. "It is hard, Mom. No one is hiring. I am thinking about applying at the grocery store." "Good," she said. "Manual labor suits you. Just don't expect an invitation to the gala. We can't have you showing up looking like a beggar. It would ruin Jessica's aesthetic." "I understand," I said. "And Sarah?" "Yes. Don't bother coming by the house to say goodbye. We sold it. The movers are there now. We are moving to the condo this weekend. A very nice cash buyer picked it up. A company called Phoenix Ventures. Very professional. Unlike you." I smiled. A cold, sharp smile that reflected in the glass. "I am happy for you, Mom," I said. "I hope the sale goes smoothly." "Oh, it will. We are signing the final papers next week. Goodbye, Sarah. Try not to starve." She hung up. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. She had no idea. She was bragging to the executioner about the quality of the rope. I walked back into the boardroom. The investors were waiting. Liam looked at me, a question in his eyes. I gave him a barely perceptible nod. The trap was set. Linda had taken the bait. She believed she had sold the house to a faceless corporation. She believed she had won. She believed I was destitute. I sat down at the head of the table, adjusted my blazer, and addressed the room. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. Now, regarding the acquisition price, let us discuss the terms of surrender." I was talking to the investors, but in my head, I was speaking to Linda. My life had become a series of compartments. In one box, I was the shark. In the other, I was the sheep. It was exhausting. There were nights I came home to my empty loft, poured a glass of wine, and just stared at the wall, wondering if it was worth it. Wondering if revenge would actually make me feel better, or if it would just leave me as hollow as the house I was about to buy. But then I would remember the look on Jessica's face when she mocked my shoes. I would remember Linda refusing to sign my student loan application while sitting in a kitchen I had paid to keep warm. I would remember the feeling of invisibility. And I knew I couldn't stop. Liam was my anchor. He kept me sane. He reminded me that what we were doing wasn't just revenge, it was a corrective measure. We were balancing the scales of the universe. One night after we finished drafting the purchase agreement for the house debt, Liam drove me home. He idled his car in front of my building. "Sarah," he said softly, "when this is over, when you own the house and they are gone." "What happens then?" I looked at him. "I don't know," I admitted. "I have spent so long surviving them, I don't know who I am without the fight." "You are the person who built all this," he said, gesturing to the city, to the life I had created. "You are the landlord." Remember, I smiled. "I am the landlord." I got out of the car. I didn't know it then, but the hardest part wasn't going to be buying the house. The hardest part was going to be the confrontation. Because Linda wasn't just going to sign the papers and leave. She was going to fight dirty. And Jessica was about to pull a stunt that would threaten not just my plan but my entire career at Titan. As I rode the elevator up to my penthouse, I checked my email on my phone. There was a notification from the Internal Ethics Committee at Titan. Subject: urgent inquiry regarding conflict of interest. My heart skipped a beat. Someone had tipped them off. Someone knew I was Phoenix Ventures. I froze as the doors opened. If I lost my job now, the financing for the house would fall through. Linda would get the cash from a different buyer. She would escape, and I would be left with nothing. I opened the email. The sender was anonymous. But the language, the petty vindictive phrasing, it didn't sound like a corporate whistleblower. It sounded like a jealous sister. I walked into my apartment, threw my keys on the counter, and dialed Liam. "Don't go to sleep," I said. "We have a leak." The war wasn't just on the home front anymore. It had breached the walls of my sanctuary, and I had to plug the hole before my entire world flooded. The war for my childhood home did not begin with a bang. It began with the slow, suffocating silence of rejection. For 3 days after I set my plan in motion, I sat in my glass-walled office at Titan, monitoring the real estate listings on one screen and my mother's digital footprint on the other. I watched as Linda tried to sell the house the traditional way, and I watched as the reality of her financial crimes slammed the door in her face over and over again. She had hired a local realtor, a woman named Patricia, who had known our family for years. Patricia was kind, the sort of woman who sent Christmas cards with pictures of her cats. She didn't know that she was stepping into a minefield. On Monday morning, the listing went live. By Monday afternoon, it was flagged. By Tuesday, it was gone. I didn't have to guess what happened. I knew. Patricia had done her due diligence. She had pulled the preliminary title report. She had seen the 3 mortgages, the maxed-out home equity line, and the pending foreclosure notice from the bank. She had likely called Linda in a panic, asking why the house was listed for sale when the bank was weeks away from seizing it. And knowing Linda, my mother had probably screamed at her, accused her of incompetence, and fired her. That was the pattern. Linda never accepted responsibility. To her, the liens on the house were not debts she owed. They were administrative errors caused by a jealous universe. By Wednesday, desperation set in. I could see it in the frantic activity on Jessica's social media. She posted a story on Instagram, a close-up of her tear-stained face with the caption, "Why do people want to destroy my dreams? The launch is only 2 weeks away, and the universe is testing me." They needed cash. Fast. The venue for the launch party required a $20,000 deposit by Friday, or they would lose the reservation. Linda needed to liquidate the house, but no legitimate realtor would touch a property that was underwater and drowning in fraud. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was when the predator became the prey. I signaled my team to deploy the bait. We didn't call her. That would have been too suspicious. Instead, I used the algorithms. I knew Linda spent her nights scrolling through Facebook and luxury lifestyle blogs. I instructed our marketing department to run a targeted ad campaign restricted to her IP address and geolocated to the house on Oak Creek Drive. The ad was simple. It featured a generic stock photo of a handshake and bold gold lettering, Phoenix Ventures. We buy high-value homes for cash. No inspections. No waiting. Instant closing. It was the kind of ad that screamed too good to be true to anyone with a shred of business sense. But to a desperate narcissist who believed she deserved a miracle, it looked like salvation. I was in a meeting with the acquisitions team when my phone buzzed. It was a text from the burner phone I had given to Marcus, one of my junior analysts. Marcus was 24 sharp and had a voice that sounded like he had been born in a boardroom. I had cast him as the senior broker for Phoenix Ventures. Target acquired the text read, "She just called. She wants to meet today." I felt a cold shiver trace its way down my spine. It was happening. I left the meeting feigning a headache and went straight to the secure operations room we had set up on the floor below. It was a small office we used for sensitive negotiations, stripped of any Titan branding. We had set up a live audio feed, so I could listen to the meeting without being seen. I put on the headphones. The silence in the room was heavy. I checked the time. 2 o'clock. At 2:05 p.m., I heard the door open. Mrs. Jenkins Marcus's voice came through the feed, smooth and professional. "Please come in. Can I get you some water? Or perhaps champagne?" "Champagne would be lovely," Linda's voice replied. It was her society voice, but I could hear the tremor in it. She was terrified, but she was masking it with entitlement. "And who is this charming young lady?" "This is my business partner and daughter," Jessica, Linda continued. "She is the creative mind behind J-Style. We are very busy with her launch, so we appreciate you accommodating our schedule." I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I could picture them perfectly. Linda in her best suit, holding her chin too high. Jessica in oversized sunglasses, looking bored and anxious. "Please sit down," Marcus said. "I have reviewed the property details you sent over. A lovely colonial. 4 bedrooms. Prime location. Phoenix Ventures is very interested. We are willing to part with it," Linda said, her voice breezy. "We are downsizing. The house is just too big for 2 women. We want to move closer to the city center for Jessica's business. We are looking for a quick, uncomplicated sale. We value our privacy, so we don't want a parade of strangers walking through our home for open houses." "Of course," Marcus replied. "We specialize in discretion." Now, Mrs. Jenkins, as I explained on the phone, Phoenix Ventures operates differently than a bank. We are a private investment firm. We buy the property as is. We don't require inspections. We don't require repairs. We can wire the funds to your account within 24 hours of signing." I heard the sharp intake of breath from Jessica. 24 hours. That is correct," Marcus said. "However, because we move so fast, and because we bypass the traditional month-long title search process to get you your money immediately, we require something in return." "And what is that?" Linda asked, her tone sharpening slightly. "Trust," Marcus said, "and a legal guarantee." I held my breath. This was the trap. Marcus continued, the rustle of paper audible through the headphones. "This is our standard purchase agreement, but attached to it is an affidavit of solvency and title. Since we are handing you cash before we do a deep dive into the county records, we need you to swear under penalty of perjury and civil liability that the title is clean." "Explain that to me in English," Jessica snapped. "It means," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious, "that you are certifying there are no undisclosed liens on the house. No second mortgages. No home equity lines. No tax debts. No pending legal actions like foreclosure. If you sign this and we find out later that there are debts attached to the house, you aren't just liable for breaching the contract. It would be considered wire fraud and theft by deception." The room went silent. I pressed the headphones closer to my ears. This was the off-ramp. If Linda had a shred of decency, if she had even a tiny chaotic moral compass, she would stop here. She would say, "Actually, there are some debts we need to clear." If she did that, the deal would change. We would still buy it, but we would pay off the bank directly, leaving her with nothing but her freedom. But if she lied, if she signed that paper knowing the bank was foreclosing next month, she was handing me the power to put her in prison. Well, Linda said, her laugh nervous and high-pitched. That sounds very intense. But I assure you our finances are impeccable. My late husband left us very comfortable. The house is free and clear. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. She lied. She lied about Dad. She lied about the house. She lied to a stranger's face without blinking. Are you sure? Marcus asked. I instructed him to ask 3 times. To give her 3 chances to tell the truth. Because legally, I needed to prove intent. I am sure, young man, Linda said, sounding offended. Do I look like someone who skips out on bills? The house is paid off. We just want a fast closing because we have international travel plans for the fashion line. International travel plans. She was planning to flee. She was going to take the money and run before the bank realized the house was sold. Very well, Marcus said. The offer is on the table. $650,000. Cash. $650? Jessica squealed. Mom, sign it. Sign it now. That is acceptable, Linda said, trying to sound bored, though I knew her heart must have been hammering against her ribs. I heard the slide of the paper across the polished table. I heard the click of a pen. Wait, Marcus said. One last thing. Since the deed is currently in your name, Mrs. Jenkins, are you the sole owner? No other claims. Sole owner, Linda confirmed. And you understand that by signing this, you are authorizing Phoenix Ventures to take immediate possession on Friday. Yes, we are packing now, Linda said impatiently. Where do I sign? Right here. And here. And initial the affidavit here. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the loudest noise in the world. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was done. Excellent, Marcus said. I will have the wire transfer initiated. It should hit your account by tomorrow morning. Thank you, Marcus, Linda said. You have been a delight. Come, Jessica. We have a gala to plan. I heard the scraping of chairs. I heard their footsteps retreating. I heard the door close. I took off the headphones. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a strange hollow mixture of adrenaline and grief. She had done it. She had committed a felony to rob a company she thought was an easy mark. She had sold a house she didn't own for money she didn't deserve to a daughter she didn't recognize. I picked up my phone and texted Marcus. Did she sign the affidavit? A photo came through a second later. It was a high-resolution image of the signature page. Linda Jenkins. The letters were loopy and large, confident. And right above it, the paragraph in bold text stating that the property was free of all encumbrances. I forwarded the image to Liam. Got her, I typed. Liam replied instantly. The wire transfer is set to a holding account. She will see the pending notification, but she won't be able to touch the money until we release it. Which we won't. I am preparing the eviction notice and the fraud lawsuit. When do you want to drop the hammer? I looked out the window of the operations room. The sun was shining, but everything felt gray. Not yet, I replied. Let her think she won. Let her spend the next 24 hours planning her new life. Let her feel safe. I want to do it when she is at her highest point. I went back to my office, but I couldn't focus on work. I kept looking at that signature. It was the same signature that had forged my father's name on the mortgage documents I had found earlier. It was the same signature that had refused to co-sign my student loans. That night I drove past the house again. There was a moving truck in the driveway. They were throwing things in. Not packing them carefully, throwing them. I saw a lamp my father loved shatter into a dumpster. I saw black garbage bags piled high on the curb. They were erasing us. They were erasing the history of the family to make room for Jessica's future. My phone buzzed. It was Linda. Sarah, she said, her voice dripping with triumph. I just wanted to let you know that we sold the house. For cash. Over asking price. I know, Mom, I whispered to the empty car. So much for your little landlord fantasy, she gloated. We are rich, Sarah. Filthy rich. And you know what, I was going to give you a little something. maybe a few $100s to help with your rent. But after how you treated us, you get nothing, not a dime." I gripped the steering wheel. "That is okay, Mom. I don't want your money." "Good. Because you aren't getting it. We are leaving on Friday. Don't try to find us." She hung up. I sat there in the dark watching them purge their lives. She thought she was rich. She thought the $650,000 was sitting in her account waiting to be spent. She didn't know that the bank error preventing the withdrawal was actually a freeze order I had placed. She didn't know that the Phoenix Ventures she had sold to was owned by the daughter she despised. And she certainly didn't know that the legal guarantee she had signed was a confession. I drove home to my penthouse, but sleep didn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scratch of the pen. The trap was sprung. The door was locked. Now all that was left was to turn on the lights and let them see who was holding the key. But fate, it seemed, had one more twist in store. The next morning, Thursday, the day before the eviction, I walked into the Titan building feeling the weight of the impending confrontation. I was ready for the end. I was ready for the screaming. But I wasn't ready for Jessica. I got to my desk and found a frantic voicemail from the venue manager of the Ritz-Carlton, where Jessica's launch party was supposed to be held. I had contacts there from my corporate event planning days. "Ms. Jenkins," the message said. "This is David from the Ritz. I know you aren't involved in your sister's event, but we have a situation. Jessica is here. She is demanding we upgrade the package to the platinum tier because she says she has unlimited funds coming in today. But the card she gave us, it was declined. She is screaming at the staff. She is throwing things. And she just told everyone that her sister, the vice president of Titan, is going to come down here and fire us all if we don't give her what she wants." My blood ran cold. She was using my name. She was using my real title. How did she know I hadn't told them? I had been so careful. I grabbed my bag and ran for the elevators. If Jessica knew I was at Titan, she knew everything. And if she knew everything, the element of surprise, my greatest weapon, was gone. I had to get to the Ritz. I had to stop her before she destroyed my reputation and blew the cover off the entire operation. But as I raced through the lobby, I realized something terrifying. Jessica didn't know I was the owner of Phoenix Ventures. She just knew I was an executive at Titan. She was trying to bully her way into a free party by leveraging my name, thinking I would pay to avoid a scandal. She was right about one thing. There was going to be a scandal. But it wasn't going to be mine. I dialed Liam as I jumped into a cab. "Meet me at the Ritz," I shouted, "and bring the papers, all of them." The final showdown wasn't going to happen at the house. It was going to happen in a ballroom full of balloons and champagne in front of the very people Linda and Jessica were trying so hard to impress. And I was going to be the one to pop the cork. The crystal chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered like suspended diamonds, casting a soft golden light over the 300 guests below. From my vantage point on the mezzanine balcony, the room looked like a jewelry box that had been spilled open. There were tuxedos, floor-length gowns, and the hum of polite conversation that cost $1,000 a plate to join. It was the annual Titan Charity Gala, the most exclusive event of the Chicago social season. And I was shaking. I wasn't shaking from nerves about my speech. I was shaking because I was watching a crime in progress. Down there, weaving through the crowd like a predator in red silk, was my sister Jessica. She wasn't supposed to be here. This event was invitation only, reserved for major donors and corporate partners. But Linda and Jessica had a talent for social engineering that rivaled professional spies. I had learned earlier that day through a frantic call from my banking contact that Linda had drained the very last of her savings account, the emergency money she had sworn was for their moving expenses, to buy a scalp ticket from a third-party website. $5,000. She had spent $5,000 they didn't have on a dress Jessica couldn't afford, and a ticket to a room where she didn't belong. It was their final gamble. Linda's logic, twisted as always, was that Jessica needed to be seen. She needed to find a wealthy investor, or better yet, a husband, before the reality of their homelessness set in on Friday. They treated this gala not as a charity event, but as a hunting ground. I watched Jessica stop a waiter taking a glass of champagne with a haughty tilt of her head. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. The red dress was stunning, backless, and daring, bought with money that should have paid off the liens on our house. She threw her head back, laughing at something a man in a tuxedo said. She looked like she owned the place. She looked like the golden child she had always been told she was. But I knew the truth. I knew she was a fraud wrapped in silk. I adjusted my earpiece. As the event organizer, I had access to the security feeds and the floor microphones. I needed to know who she was targeting. I signaled the sound technician in the booth next to me. "Channel 4, I whispered, "near the ice sculpture." The audio crackled into my ear. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of voices. Then Jessica's voice cut through, clear and sickeningly sweet. "Oh, absolutely," she was saying. "I am the founder of J-Style. We are launching next month. It is going to revolutionize sustainable fashion in the Midwest." I gritted my teeth. Sustainable fashion. Jessica threw away clothes if they had a loose thread. The man she was talking to turned slightly and my breath caught in my throat. It was Mr. Sterling, my boss, the CEO of Titan. He smiled politely. The practiced smile of a man who is used to being pitched to by strangers. "That is impressive, Miss Jenkins," Jessica said. "Jessica Jenkins," Jenkins Sterling repeated. He paused. The name sparked a recognition. "I have a vice president named Jenkins, Sarah Jenkins." Any relation? I gripped the railing of the balcony. This was it. This was the moment she could have shown a shred of loyalty. She could have said yes. She could have said, "Yes, that is my brilliant sister." But I watched Jessica's face change. The bright flirtatious smile vanished, replaced by a mask of tragic bravery. She lowered her eyes, performing a perfect pantomime of sorrow. "Oh," she sighed, and the sound was heavy with fake burden. "Sarah." "Yes. She is my older sister." "Mr." Sterling looked intrigued. "You don't sound very happy about it." "It is just difficult," Jessica said, leaning in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that I could hear perfectly in my earpiece. "We try not to talk about Sarah in professional circles. It is too painful for the family." "Is she ill?" Sterling asked. Jessica looked around as if checking for spies before delivering the lie that would seal her fate. "I wish it were just illness," she said. "It is addiction and severe mental instability. She has been in and out of rehab for years. My mother and I have tried everything. We paid for treatments. We gave her money, but she steals from us. She actually embezzled from her last job at a restaurant. It is heartbreaking, really. We suspect she lied on her resume to get a job at some corporate firm recently. I am terrified for whoever hired her. She is a ticking time bomb." I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and numb. Addiction, embezzlement, mental instability. She wasn't just distancing herself. She was assassinating my character. She was planting a nuclear bomb in my career to elevate herself. If Mr. Sterling didn't know me, if he hadn't worked with me side by side for 6 months, that accusation could have triggered an investigation. It could have got me fired. She was willing to destroy my livelihood to make herself look like the saintly suffering sister. Mr. Sterling's face remained impassive. He took a sip of his drink. "That is very disturbing to hear, Miss Jenkins." "It is my burden to bear," Jessica said with a brave little smile. "But that is why I work so hard on my fashion line. I want to show the world that the Jenkins name stands for excellence, not whatever Sarah is." I had heard enough. I pulled the earpiece out. My hands were no longer shaking. A cold, hard resolve had settled over me. I turned to the stage manager, a young woman with a headset, who looked terrified of me. "Cue the lights," I said. "I am going down." "But Ms. Jenkins, the keynote isn't for another 10 minutes. Now," I said. The stage manager scrambled to her console. I walked down the back stairs, my heels silent on the plush carpet. I smoothed the skirt of my own dress, a midnight blue gown that was understated professional and cost more than Jessica's entire imaginary inventory. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The conversation died down. A spotlight hit the center of the stage. The voice of the announcer boomed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the director of tonight's gala and the newly appointed Vice President of Acquisitions for Titan Real Estate, Ms. Sarah Jenkins. I walked out from the wings. The applause was polite at first, then grew louder as the recognition set in. I stepped up to the microphone. The spotlight was blinding, but I could see past it. I knew exactly where they were standing. I scanned the room. Row 1, row 2, the VIP tables, near the ice sculpture. There, Jessica was frozen. Her champagne glass was halfway to her mouth. Her face was a portrait of pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes were wide, staring at me as if I were a ghost. Next to her, Mr. Sterling was looking from me to her, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. He knew. He had played along just to see how deep she would dig her own grave. I leaned into the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice was steady, magnified, to fill every corner of the room. "Thank you for joining us tonight to support the Titan Housing Initiative." I paused, letting the silence stretch. I locked eyes with Jessica. She looked like she wanted to run, but her feet were glued to the floor. "Tonight we are here to talk about foundations," I continued. "In real estate, a foundation is everything. You can paint a house, you can decorate it with expensive furniture. You can put a fresh coat of lies over the cracks. But if the foundation is rotten, the structure will eventually collapse." I saw Jessica flinch. "It is the same in business and in life." I said, my voice hardening. Titan was built on the values of transparency, honesty, and integrity. We do not tolerate fraud. We do not tolerate people who pretend to be something they are not to gain access to resources they did not earn. A murmur went through the crowd. They could sense the tension. They sensed this wasn't a standard corporate speech. There are people in this city, perhaps even in this room, who believe that appearance is currency. I said, never breaking eye contact with my sister. People who would slander their own family to climb a ladder that doesn't belong to them. People who wear expensive dresses bought with stolen money telling stories about success while their own house is being foreclosed on. Jessica dropped her glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Champagne splashed onto the hem of her red dress. People around her jumped back, staring. But at Titan, I concluded, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, we believe that the truth always comes out, usually right before the eviction. I stepped back from the mic. I looked toward the side of the room and gave a subtle nod. Two large men in dark suits, the head of Titan Security and his deputy, stepped out of the shadows. They didn't run. They moved with the terrifying purpose of inevitable consequences. They headed straight for the ice sculpture. Jessica was trembling now. She looked at Mr. Sterling, her eyes pleading for help. "Mr. Sterling," she stammered loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You know me. Tell them I am supposed to be here." Mr. Sterling looked at her with ice-cold indifference. "I don't know you, Miss Jenkins, but I do know your sister, and I know that Titan has a very strict policy against trespassers." The security guards reached her. "Ma'am," the lead guard said, his voice low but firm. "We need you to come with us." "No!" Jessica shrieked. She tried to pull away, but the guard caught her arm. "This is a mistake. I have a ticket. My mother bought it. We checked the ticket number, ma'am," the guard said. "It was flagged as purchased with a credit card, reported for insufficient funds an hour ago. It is invalid. You are crashing a private event. Insufficient funds." Linda's card had bounced. The scalper must have run it, got the authorization, and then the bank reversed it when they realized the account was empty. The final humiliation. "Get your hands off me!" Jessica screamed. She was causing a scene now, exactly the kind of scene Linda had warned me never to make. "Do you know who my sister is?" "She is up there. Sarah." "Sarah, tell them." She pointed at me, her finger shaking. Every eye in the room turned to me. 300 of the wealthiest people in Chicago were waiting to see what the vice president would do. I stood on the edge of the stage looking down at her. I looked at the sister who had laughed when I couldn't afford college, the sister who had driven a BMW while I took the bus, the sister who had just called me a drug addict to my own boss. I leaned back toward the microphone one last time. "I am sorry," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I don't know that woman." The room gasped. Jessica let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. The guards didn't wait any longer. They took her by the elbows and marched her toward the exit. She dragged her feet, her heels scraping across the floor, the red dress bunching up around her legs. "You will pay for this," she screamed, as they dragged her through the double doors. "Mom will kill you." "You are nothing. You are just a waitress." The doors swung shut, cutting off her voice. Silence descended on the ballroom. A waiter hurried over to sweep up the broken glass. I looked at Mr. Sterling. He raised his glass to me in a silent toast. I took a deep breath, smoothing my expression back into professional neutrality. "I apologize for the disturbance," I said to the crowd. "Now please enjoy the first course. And remember, verify your investments." I walked off the stage. My legs felt like jelly. I collapsed onto a chair in the wings, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had done it. I had publicly disowned her. I had watched her get thrown out of the world she so desperately wanted to be part of. But as I sat there listening to the clatter of silverware returning to the room, I didn't feel happy. I felt a grim, cold satisfaction. It was the feeling of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. It hurts, and there is blood, but it has to be done to survive. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Liam. I saw the security feed. "Brutal, but effective. Now get ready. Phase 2 starts tomorrow morning. The eviction notice is printed. And Sarah, check your email." Linda just sent a frantic message to Phoenix Ventures asking why the wire transfer hasn't gone through yet. I stared at the screen. The gala was just the fireworks. The real explosion was set for tomorrow. I stood up, wiping a single tear from my eye. I wasn't the girl they threw away anymore. I was the one holding the remote control. And tomorrow, I was going to change the channel. The morning after the gala, the sun rose over Chicago with a deceptive brilliance. From the 40th floor of the Titan building, the city looked scrubbed clean, shimmering in the early light. But inside the secure operations room, the atmosphere was thick with the static electricity of a coming storm. I had not slept. I was running on 3 shots of espresso and the cold, hard fuel of vindication. Liam sat across from me, his tie loosened, watching 3 different monitors. We were not looking at stock tickers or market trends. We were watching a single bank account. This was the trap. The final test of character. We had initiated the wire transfer from Phoenix Ventures at 9 in the morning, $650,000. To a normal person, that amount of money is life-changing. To my mother, Linda, it was just enough to maintain the delusion of her existence for another year. The terms of the contract she had signed were explicit. The funds were provided for the sole purpose of conveying clear title. Legally, the moment that money hit her account, her fiduciary duty was to pay off the 3 mortgages, the tax liens, and the debts attached to the house. Whatever was left over, which we knew would be nothing, was hers to keep. If she used a single cent of that money for anything else before clearing the title, she was committing conversion of funds. She was committing mortgage fraud. She was committing grand larceny. I stared at the screen, watching the status bar. Transfer complete. The money was in her account. "Now we wait," Liam said softly. I checked my watch. It was 9:15 a.m. I pictured her. She was probably sitting at the kitchen island in the house she had already packed up, refreshing her banking app on her phone. I imagined the scream of delight when she saw the balance jump from 2 figures to 6. I imagined her hugging Jessica. I imagined them laughing about how easy it was to trick the corporate fools at Phoenix Ventures. At 9:30 a.m., the first movement occurred. Liam sat up straighter. Here we go. A transaction appeared on the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted her to do the right thing. Some small broken part of me that still remembered being 6 years old and holding her hand wanted her to pay the mortgage. I wanted her to prove me wrong. I wanted her to be a mother who protected her home, not a thief who looted it. Pay the bank. Mom, I whispered, please just pay the bank. But the transaction didn't go to Wells Fargo. It didn't go to Chase. It didn't go to the county tax assessor. Transfer of $120,000 to Prestige Imports of Chicago. I closed my eyes. The air left my lungs in a rush. She bought a car, Liam said, his voice flat. She hasn't even had the money for 20 minutes and she bought a car. I opened my eyes. She didn't just buy a car. She bought a status symbol. She bought a getaway vehicle. She had taken the money meant to clear the debt on my father's house and spent it on leather seats and a sunroof. It wasn't over. 5 minutes later, transfer of $50,000 to Neiman Marcus. 10 minutes later, transfer of $25,000 to Ritz-Carlton Events. She was paying for the party. She was buying the dresses. She was funding the lie. She is not going to pay the mortgage. I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. She is going to run. She is spending what she can now, and she is going to take the rest and disappear. Liam typed a command on his keyboard. That is it. The trap is sprung. We have proof of dissipation of assets. We have proof of fraud. Sarah, give the order. I looked at the screen one last time. I looked at the rapid-fire depletion of the funds. Every dollar she spent was a nail in her coffin. She wasn't just stealing from Phoenix Ventures. She was stealing from me. She was stealing the last chance she had to be an honest woman. Execute the eviction, I said. The next 2 hours were a blur of orchestrated chaos. We didn't send a letter. We sent a team. Because we owned the debt, and because we had the signed affidavit proving she had lied about the title, we had obtained an emergency court order for immediate possession. At noon, a black SUV pulled up to 42 Oak Creek Drive. It wasn't the police yet. It was the private enforcement division of the bank, accompanied by a court-appointed process server. I wasn't there, but I had a live feed from the security camera I had installed months ago, disguised as a floodlight. I watched on my tablet as Linda opened the door. She was wearing a silk robe, a glass of champagne in her hand. She looked triumphant. She looked untouchable. Then the process server handed her the papers. I saw the glass slip from her fingers. I saw it shatter on the porch. I couldn't hear the audio, but I knew the script. They were telling her that the sale to Phoenix Ventures was void due to fraudulent misrepresentation. They were telling her that the bank, which was now Titan, was exercising its right to immediate foreclosure. They were telling her that because she had spent the purchase funds on personal items instead of clearing the title, she was now criminally liable. And then they told her she had to leave. Now. I watched her scream. I watched her point at the driveway where the movers were loading the last of the boxes. I saw Jessica run out of the house, still wearing her pajamas, looking terrified. The process server didn't flinch. He pointed to the street. They had 20 minutes to grab their personal essentials. Everything else, the furniture, the boxes, the memories, was now collateral damage in a federal investigation. I turned off the tablet. I couldn't watch anymore. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was a deep, hollow ache. It was the tragedy of watching someone drown because they refused to grab the life preserver. But Linda Jenkins was not a woman who went down quietly. An hour later, my phone began to ring. It wasn't Linda. It was my old landlady, Mrs. Higgins, Sarah. Mrs. Higgins squawked, her voice shrill with panic. There is a crazy woman here. She is banging on the basement door. She is screaming your name. She says she is your mother, and she is going to have you arrested. I stood up. Linda had gone to the only place she thought she could find me. She had gone to the damp, moldy basement apartment where she thought I lived. She needed a scapegoat. She needed someone to blame for the ruin she had brought upon herself. She couldn't accept that she had been outsmarted by a corporation, so she had convinced herself that somehow this was my fault. Maybe she thought I had tipped them off. Maybe she just wanted to scream at me to make herself feel powerful again. "I am sorry, Mrs. Higgins," I said calmly. "Call the police if she doesn't leave." "I don't live there anymore." I hung up. Then my cell phone rang. "Mother." I let it ring 3 times. I walked over to the window of my office. I looked down at the city. I looked at the reflection of the woman in the glass, the woman who had scrubbed floors, the woman who had eaten ramen, the woman who had been told she was worthless. I answered. "You little witch!" The scream was so loud it distorted the speaker. "Where are you?" Linda shrieked. "I am at your apartment. The door is locked. The landlady says, 'You moved. Where are you hiding?' I am at work." "Linda," I said. "Work. You don't have a job. You are a waitress. And you know what? You are a bad daughter, a useless, spiteful, jealous child." She was hyperventilating. I could hear the traffic in the background. She must be standing on the sidewalk, pacing like a caged animal. "They kicked us out. Sarah, they kicked us out of our own house. Some bank goons showed up and said the sale was fake. They said I committed fraud. Me." "Linda Jenkins? Did you?" I asked. "Did I what? Did you commit fraud?" "Mother, did you sign a paper saying the house was debt-free and then spend the money on a Mercedes?" There was a silence, a stunned, heavy silence. "How do you know about the Mercedes?" she whispered. I didn't answer. You talked to them, didn't you?" Her voice rose again, finding a new target for her rage. "You called the bank. You reported me. You are trying to sabotage Jessica's launch because you are jealous that she is successful and you are nothing. I am going to sue you," she screamed. "I am going to sue you for filial negligence. I am going to sue you for emotional distress. I am going to tell everyone what a horrible, ungrateful daughter you are. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me, by letting your mother end up on the street. I listened to her. I let her pour all the poison out. I let her empty the tank." "Are you finished?" I asked quietly. "No, I am coming to find you. I will find you at that restaurant. I will make a scene that will make the brunch incident look like a tea party. I will ruin you." "Sarah." I took a deep breath. "You don't need to come find me, Mom," I said. "And you don't need to sue me." "Oh, I will sue you. I have a lawyer." "You don't have a lawyer, Mom. You can't afford a lawyer. You just spent your last dollar on a car that is about to be repossessed." "Shut up. You don't know anything. I know everything I said. And you don't need to look for me because I will see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" She sounded confused. "Yes. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., at the Cook County Courthouse." "Why? Why would I meet you there?" Because I said, allowing the ice to enter my voice, sharpening every syllable until it was a blade. "My lawyer will be there to file the civil suit against you." "Civil suit. For what? Being a bad mother? There is no law against that." "No," I said. "For fraud, for theft by deception, and for breach of contract." "You are crazy," she scoffed. "You can't sue me. You have no standing." "Actually, I have all the standing," I said. And then I dropped the mask. I let the waitress disappear. I let the scared little girl vanish. I stepped fully into the role I had built for myself. "You see, Mom, you didn't sell the house to a stranger. You sold it to Phoenix Ventures. So, what is that to you?" "Phoenix Ventures is a subsidiary of Titan Real Estate," I explained, speaking slowly, clearly so she wouldn't miss a word. "And I am the Vice President of Acquisitions for Titan Real Estate." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It wasn't just quiet. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. What she whispered. "I am the buyer, Mom. I am the one who approved the wire transfer. I am the one who watched you move the money to the car dealership instead of the bank. I am the one who sent the eviction team. No, that is impossible. You are a waitress. I was a waitress because you stole my college fund," I said. "But I haven't been a waitress for a long time. I have been the person watching you dig your own grave. You tricked me." Her voice was trembling now, all the fight draining out of it. "You set me up. I didn't make you sign a false affidavit, Mom. I didn't make you spend stolen money on a car. I didn't make you forge Dad's signature on the mortgage documents 3 years ago. I just gave you a rope. You are the one who tied the noose. Sarah, please. She started to cry. It was that fake wheedling cry she used on my father. Sarah, baby. Listen. We can fix this. You can stop it. You are the vice president. That is amazing. I always knew you were special. You can call them off. You can tell them it was a mistake. We are family. You can't let your mother go to jail. I looked at the phone. I looked at the contact photo of the puppy. I am not doing this to you, Mom, I said. You did this to yourself. And by the way, the Mercedes, we have already contacted the dealership. They are reporting it as a fraudulent purchase. So don't get too comfortable in those leather seats. Sarah. Wait. Where am I supposed to go? We have nowhere to go. I don't know, I said. Maybe you should try being resourceful. Isn't that what you told me when you left me in the dark at 14? Figure it out. I am not coming to the courthouse, she screamed. I won't do it. If you don't come to the courthouse tomorrow to sign the surrender of assets, I said, then the next people who come to find you won't be process servers. They will be the FBI. Wire fraud is a federal crime, Mom. And I have the receipts. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of the release. The burden was gone. The secret was out. I turned to Liam. She knows, I said. Liam nodded. He handed me a file. Then let's go, he said. We have a deposition to prepare. I walked out of the office. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the city. I thought about Linda standing on the sidewalk outside a damp basement, screaming at a ghost. I thought about the house on Oak Creek Drive, empty and silent for the first time in 20 years. The counterattack was over. The enemy was routed. But the war wasn't finished until the ink was dry. Tomorrow I would look her in the eye. Not as her daughter, not as her victim, but as her creditor, and I would collect every single thing she owed me. Not in money, but in justice. The conference room on the 40th floor of the Titan building was designed to intimidate. It was a space of glass and steel suspended high above the city, where the air conditioning hummed with a sterile, expensive silence. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, my hands folded on top of a single thin manila folder. To my right sat Liam, looking every bit the corporate shark in his charcoal suit. We were not in a courtroom, but make no mistake, this was a trial. And I was both the judge and the executioner. At exactly 8 o'clock, the heavy glass doors opened. The receptionist ushered them in. I had expected fireworks. I had expected Linda to storm in screaming, demanding to see the manager, demanding my resignation. But the woman who walked through those doors was a ghost of the person who had terrorized my childhood. Linda looked smaller. Her designer suit was wrinkled, likely pulled from a suitcase in a panic. Her hair, usually sprayed into an impenetrable helmet of perfection, was flat. Beside her, Jessica looked like a child who had been caught shoplifting. She wore sunglasses indoors, trying to hide puffy eyes, but her hands were trembling so violently that her purse shook against her hip. They stopped at the other end of the long table. They didn't sit. They just stared at me. For a moment, the only sound was the low buzz of the city far below. Please sit down, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the fear that used to choke me whenever I spoke to them. Linda pulled out a chair and collapsed into it. She looked at the view, then at Liam, and finally she forced herself to look at me. Sarah, she began, her voice cracking. We stayed in a motel last night. A motel, Sarah. With roaches. I didn't blink. I stayed in a basement with black mold for 3 years, Mother. I think you will survive one night at a Motel 6. Liam cleared his throat. He opened his laptop and connected it to the large screen on the wall behind us. Mrs. Jenkins. Miss Jenkins, Liam said, his tone professional and icy. We are here to discuss the resolution of Titan Real Estate's claims against you. We are skipping the pleasantries because, quite frankly, your legal position is indefensible. Linda stiffened, trying to summon some of her old arrogance. We didn't do anything wrong. That contract was a trick. You entrapped us. I leaned forward. Entrapment implies I forced you to commit a crime, Linda. All I did was offer you money. You were the one who chose to steal it. I signaled to Liam. He pressed a key. The screen behind us lit up. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was footage from the security camera at the Gilded Spoon, taken on Mother's Day. I had pulled the archives. The video showed Linda standing over my table, her face twisted in a sneer. The audio was crystal clear. How embarrassing for us. Someone in the family has to be the failure so you can shine brighter. I watched Linda's face as she watched herself. She went pale. She saw the cruelty stripped of its context, stripped of her justifications. She saw herself as the world saw her, a bully. Then the video changed. It was the footage from the gala 2 nights ago. Jessica screaming at the security guards. My sister is a drug addict. She embezzles money. Jessica let out a small whimper and looked down at her lap. This is character assassination, Liam said. In the state of Illinois, this constitutes defamation per se. You publicly accused a corporate executive of a felony and substance abuse with zero evidence. We could sue you for millions on this alone. But we are not here for defamation, I said. I slid the manila folder across the table. It stopped right in front of Linda. Open it. Linda's hand shook as she reached out. She opened the folder. Inside were copies of bank records. Old ones. These are the withdrawal slips from my college fund, I said. The account was joint, but the funds were deposited by me. You withdrew $40,000 on August 12, 2018. Linda looked up, her eyes wide. That was years ago. You can't bring that up now. I can actually, I said. Because I hired a forensic accountant. We traced the money. You didn't spend it on household emergencies. You spent it on a BMW for Jessica. You spent it on a vacation to Turks and Caicos. That is theft, Linda. You stole from your own child. And then Liam placed a second document on the table. And this, he said, is the deed transfer for the second mortgage on the house. Dated 2021. Signed by Harold Jenkins. Linda stopped breathing. The air left the room. Harold Jenkins died in 2014, Liam continued. Forging a dead man's signature on a federal loan document is bank fraud. It carries a sentence of up to 30 years in federal prison. Linda looked at me, terror flooding her eyes. Sarah? I had to. We needed the money. Your father would have wanted us to be comfortable. Dad would have wanted you to work, I snapped. He wouldn't have wanted you to turn his name into a felony. I stood up and walked over to the window. I couldn't look at her anymore. The pathetic nature of her crimes made me sick. It wasn't some grand heist. It was just petty, selfish greed. But the final nail in the coffin, I said, turning back to face them, is what you did on Monday. You signed an affidavit stating the house was free of debt. You took $650,000 from Phoenix Ventures. And instead of paying off the illegal loans you took out, you bought a Mercedes. I pointed to the screen again. A copy of the wire transfer to the car dealership appeared. That is wire fraud, Linda. It is theft by deception. And because Phoenix Ventures is a corporate entity, you defrauded a company. I walked back to the table and placed my hands flat on the wood, leaning down so my face was inches from hers. So here is where we stand. I own the debt on the house. I own the company you stole from. And I have enough evidence in this folder to put both of you in prison until Jessica is old enough to be a grandmother. Jessica began to sob. Loud, ugly sobs. Mom, you said it was safe. You said nobody would know. I don't want to go to jail. I can't go to jail. I have a brand to build. Shut up, Jessica, Linda hissed, but her voice lacked any real heat. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, please. You are my daughter. You can't send your mother to prison. What do you want? I will do anything. I will pay it back. I will get a job. Just don't call the police. I looked at Liam. He nodded. We had prepared for this. I didn't want their money. They didn't have any. And frankly, I didn't want them in prison. Prison was too easy. They would just play the victim. They would tell everyone I was the villain who locked them up. Number one, I wanted something more permanent. I wanted the truth. I have two options for you, I said. Door number one. Liam calls the FBI right now. They are waiting in the lobby. You will be arrested, handcuffed, and walked out of this building in front of the entire staff. You will be charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. You will lose everything, and you will spend the next decade in a cell. Linda shuddered. And door number two, I said. You sign a full confession. I pulled a thick document from my briefcase. This constitutes a complete surrender of assets. You will sign over the deed to the house to me voluntarily to satisfy the debt. You will sign over the Mercedes, the jewelry, and any other assets purchased with the stolen funds. You will agree to a permanent restraining order barring you from ever contacting me, my employer, or coming within 500 feet of my residence. I will sign it, Linda said, quickly reaching for a pen. I will sign it right now. I am not finished, I said. There is one more condition. I looked at Jessica. She was wiping her nose with the back of her hand. You care about your image more than anything, I said. You care about what people think. You care about the lie you have built. So the final condition is this. You will both post a video. On Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. On every platform where you have spent years bragging about your fake life. A video of what Jessica whispered, horrified. A video of the truth, I said. You will apologize. You will admit that you stole my college fund. You will admit that you lied about my mental health. You will admit that the house was foreclosed on because of your fraud. You will tell the world exactly who you are. No, Jessica gasped. I can't. It will ruin me. My followers. The brand. Your brand is built on a lie. Jessica, I said cold. If you don't do it, the FBI press release will do it for you. Those are your choices. Public humiliation or federal prison. You have 5 minutes to decide. I sat back down and checked my watch. The room was silent, save for Jessica's sniffling. Linda looked at the document, then at the screen where her own face was sneering back at her. She looked at the daughter she had worshipped, the golden child who was now looking at her with pure hatred for getting them into this mess. I watched the realization dawn on Linda. She had spent her life trying to maintain an image of perfection. She had sacrificed me on the altar of that image, and now to save her own skin she had to destroy it with her own hands. It is over, Mom, I said softly. The show is over. Linda closed her eyes. She looked old. For the first time, she looked her age. The fight drained out of her shoulders. Give me the pen, she whispered. Mom! Jessica shrieked. You can't. Do you want to go to jail? Linda snapped, her voice harsh and bitter. Because I don't. We have no choice, Jessica. She won. Linda grabbed the pen. She signed the surrender of assets. She signed the confession. She signed away the house, the car, the lies. Then she pushed the paper toward Jessica. Sign it. Jessica cried, her hand shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen, but she signed. Now the video, I said. Liam set up a tripod on the table. He took out his phone. I stood behind him. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Ready? Liam asked. Linda nodded, tears ruining her makeup. She looked into the lens. I am Linda Jenkins, she began, her voice trembling. And this is my daughter, Jessica. We are making this video to apologize to my daughter, Sarah. We want to admit that for the last 10 years, we have lived a lie. I listened to every word. I listened as they confessed to the theft. I listened as they admitted to the slander. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It wasn't revenge. It was a correction of the record. When they finished, Liam hit stop. I will upload this, I said. And once it is up, if you take it down, the deal is void, and I call the FBI. Do we understand each other? Yes, Linda whispered. Then get out, I said. They stood up. They didn't look at me. They walked out of the glass room stripped of their pride, stripped of their assets, and stripped of their masks. They walked out into a world that finally knew the truth. I sat there for a long time after they left. Liam packed up the equipment. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked at the empty chairs. I felt lighter. The heavy weight that had been sitting on my chest since I was 18 years old was gone. "I am better than okay, Liam," I said. "I am free." But the story didn't end there. Because while Linda and Jessica faded into the obscurity they so feared, I had one last piece of business to attend to. The house. My father's house. It was mine now, and I needed to walk through that front door one last time, not as a daughter, but as the owner. And what I found hidden in the attic in a box Linda had been too lazy to throw away changed everything I thought I knew about my father's death. To find out what was in that box and the final secret that brought me peace, you have to hear the end of the story. The sound of a pen scratching against paper is usually quiet, but in that glass-walled conference room, it sounded like a scream. Linda signed the final page of the surrender agreement with a hand that shook so violently the ink smeared across the signature line. She dropped the pen as if it burned her. It rolled across the mahogany table and stopped right at the edge, teetering over the abyss, much like Linda herself. Liam picked up the document. He checked the signature, checked the date, and then closed the folder with a soft thud. "It is done," he said. Linda looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She looked small, shrunken inside her wrinkled designer suit. "So that is it," she whispered. "You are taking the house. I am not taking it, Mom," I said gently. "The bank is taking it. I just happen to own the bank. And regarding the proceeds from the sale you thought you made to Phoenix Ventures, let us look at the final settlement statement." Liam projected the numbers onto the screen one last time. Sale price, $650,000. Outstanding liens and mortgages, $480,000. Penalties for fraud and early withdrawal, $100,000. Legal fees and restitution for the Mercedes purchase, $70,000. Net proceeds to seller $0. Linda stared at the $0. It was a perfect circle, a black hole that had swallowed her entire life. She had risked prison, she had betrayed her daughter, and she had destroyed her reputation, all for absolutely nothing. "You have 24 hours to vacate the motel," I said. "After that, you are on your own." They left the building in silence. I didn't watch them go. I didn't need to. The feeling of triumph I expected wasn't there. Instead, it was just a quiet, heavy sense of finality. Like closing a book that you never really enjoyed reading but had to finish just to understand the ending. The fallout happened faster than even I anticipated. I learned later that the alliance between Linda and Jessica lasted exactly 3 hours after they left my office. They were sitting in their rental car parked outside the cheap motel where they were staying. The reality of their situation had finally set in. They had no home. They had no money. They had no status. Jessica, the golden child who had never been told no, who had never worked a day in her life, looked at her mother not with sympathy, but with disgust. "This is your fault," Jessica screamed according to the witnesses in the parking lot. "You said you had a plan. You said we were going to be rich. Now I am a laughingstock. I can't even post on Instagram without people calling me a fraud. I did my best," Linda wailed. "I did it for you." "You are a loser, Mom," Jessica spat. "And I am not going down with you." That afternoon, Jessica packed her bag. She didn't stay to help Linda figure out where to go. She didn't offer to get a job. She did what she had always been taught to do. She looked for a shortcut. She called a man she had met at a club the week before, a man named Richard who claimed to be a venture capitalist from Miami. He was 30 years older than her, with dyed black hair and a suit that was a little too shiny. He had promised her the world over a few cocktails. He told her he could fund her fashion line. He told her she was a visionary. Jessica thought she was being saved. She thought she was trading a sinking ship for a luxury yacht. She left Linda crying in the motel parking lot and climbed into Richard's car thinking she had outsmarted fate one more time. But karma has a sense of humor, and it is usually dark. What Jessica didn't know, and what I only found out because Liam ran a background check on Richard out of curiosity, was that Richard was not a venture capitalist. He was a small-time con artist who targeted desperate, vain young women. He didn't have a fortune. He was living out of his car and running a pyramid scheme involving fake cryptocurrency. 2 weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Jessica was stranded in a motel in Indiana. Richard had vanished with her jewelry and the last $500 she had managed to hide from the asset seizure. The golden child was now working double shifts at a diner just to pay for a bus ticket back to a city that no longer wanted her. She was finally learning the lesson I had learned at 14. Survival is not a gift. It is a grind. As for Linda, her descent was slower and perhaps more painful because she had to face it alone. With no money, no credit, and a fraud confession on her record, no landlord would rent to her. Her friends, the society ladies she had lunched with for decades, stopped answering her calls the moment the video of her apology went viral. They didn't want to be associated with a thief. Linda Jenkins, the queen bee of the suburbs, was radioactive. She applied for government assistance. It was a process she had mocked her entire life, calling people who used it lazy and unmotivated. Now she was standing in line at the caseworker's office, clutching a number, waiting to beg for help. She was assigned a unit in a subsidized housing complex on the south side of the city. It was a stark gray concrete building. The hallways smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarette smoke. The elevator was broken. On the day she moved in carrying her 2 suitcases, which contained the only possessions she had left in the world, she walked into the management office to get her key. She was wearing sunglasses, trying to hide her face. She kept her head down. Name, the manager asked. Linda Jenkins, she whispered. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. Linda looked up. Standing behind the counter was a woman in her 40s. She was wearing a simple cardigan and reading glasses. Her name tag read, Brenda. Linda squinted. The woman looked familiar. Brenda, Linda asked, her voice trembling. The woman smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the sharp, knowing smile of someone who remembers every insult. Hello, Mrs. Jenkins, Brenda said. Linda took a step back. Brenda had been the hostess at the Gilded Spoon 5 years ago. Linda had demanded she be fired because Brenda had seated her at a table near the kitchen door. Linda had called her incompetent loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. She had humiliated her over a salad fork. I didn't know you worked here, Linda stammered. I have been the building manager here for 3 years, Brenda said, her voice cool and professional. It is honest work, but I suppose you wouldn't know much about that. Linda turned bright red. She looked at the door, wanting to run. But she had nowhere to run to. This was it. This was the end of the line. Here's your key, Brenda said, sliding a small metal key across the counter. Unit 4B, 4th floor, no elevator. And Mrs. Jenkins? Yes, Linda whispered. Rent is due on the 1st. Don't be late. We have a very strict eviction policy. And I would hate to have to throw you out. Again. Linda grabbed the key and fled toward the stairs. She dragged her suitcases up 4 flights of concrete steps, her breathing ragged, her heart pounding. She unlocked the door to Unit 4B. It was a single room with a kitchenette and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. She sat down on the thin mattress that came with the unit. She looked at the peeling paint on the ceiling. She listened to the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. And for the first time in her life, Linda Jenkins cried real tears. Not for an audience, not to manipulate, but because she finally understood that she was exactly where she deserved to be. While Linda was staring at a brick wall, I was standing on the balcony of my penthouse. It was a cool evening in Chicago. The wind coming off the lake was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and electricity. I wrapped my cashmere cardigan tighter around myself and leaned against the railing. From up here, the city was a sea of lights. Millions of golden squares, each one a window, each one a life. Somewhere down there in one of those dim corners was my mother. Somewhere out there was my sister. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the urge to call them, to gloat, to ask them how they liked the taste of rock bottom. I waited for the satisfaction of revenge to wash over me like a hot wave. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, quiet lightness. It was the feeling of putting down a heavy backpack after hiking for 20 miles. The war was over. The noise was gone. I turned and looked back into my apartment. It was beautiful. High ceilings, modern art, a kitchen that I actually cooked in. On the counter sat a box. It was an old, dusty cardboard box that I had retrieved from the attic of the house on Oak Creek Drive before the bank crews came in. It was the only thing I had taken. I walked inside and opened the box. Inside were my father's journals. The ones Linda had threatened to throw away. The ones she said were junk. I picked up the top one. It was leather-bound, worn at the corners. I opened it to the last entry written 3 days before he died. Sarah is growing up so fast, he had written in his cramped, slanted handwriting. She is quiet, but she is strong. Stronger than she knows. I worry about Linda. She spends too much. She doesn't understand the value of things. But I know Sarah will be okay. She has a fire in her. She is the one who will keep this family standing even if she has to do it alone. I am so proud of her. I trace the words with my finger. She is the one who will keep this family standing. He knew. Even back then he knew. I closed the journal and held it to my chest. I hadn't kept the family standing in the way he thought. I had dismantled the rotting structure so that I could build something new. Something real. I walked back out to the balcony. I looked at the skyline one last time. I wasn't the victim of a bad mother anymore. I wasn't the jealous sister. I wasn't the waitress serving brunch to people who looked through her. I was Sarah Jenkins. I was a survivor. I was a builder. And for the first time in my life, I was free. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean air of the city that I had conquered. I picked up my phone. I navigated to my contact list. I scrolled down to Mother. I pressed delete. Then I scrolled to Jessica. I pressed delete. I put the phone down on the railing. I picked up my glass of wine. To the landlord, I whispered to the empty air. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy one to tell, and I know it wasn't an easy one to hear. But I wanted to share it because I know there are people out there right now who are feeling small. People who are being told they aren't enough. People who are being used by the very ones who are supposed to protect them. If that is you, I want you to know something. You are not their opinion of you. You are not their credit score. You are not their retirement plan. You are the author of your own life. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to fire the people who are holding you back, even if they share your DNA. Family is not blood. Family is respect. Family is the people who cheer for you when you win, not the ones who try to steal the trophy. If you are in a storm right now, just remember storms run out of rain eventually. And when the clouds clear, you might just find that you own the building. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share these stories with the world. And drop a comment below. Tell me about a time you had to stand up for your own worth. I read every single one. Take care of yourselves. Build your foundation strong. And never ever let anyone take your keys. I am Sarah Jenkins. And I am signing off. As the sun fully set over Chicago, turning the lake into a vast expanse of dark velvet, I remained on the balcony. The city lights below were no longer just a view. They were a reminder of the millions of lives happening all at once, millions of stories being written in real time. For the first time in 26 years, I felt like I was finally holding the pen to my own. I looked down at my hands. These were the same hands that had scrubbed dishes until the skin cracked in the dead of winter. These were the same hands that had balanced heavy trays of mimosas while my feet bled in cheap shoes. These were the same hands that had gripped a steering wheel in a freezing car, terrified that I wouldn't have enough gas money to get to class. For a long time I looked at these hands and felt ashamed. I let my mother's voice echo in my head, telling me that manual labor was a sign of failure, that serving others was beneath the dignity of a Jenkins. But standing here tonight, I realized she was wrong. These hands aren't shameful. They are strong. They are capable. They built a life out of nothing. They signed the papers that reclaimed my father's legacy. They are the hands of a builder, not a thief. And I would rather have rough, tired hands from honest work than manicured, soft hands that have never known the weight of responsibility. My mother called me embarrassing. She stood in that restaurant surrounded by strangers and tried to shrink me into something small enough to fit inside her insecurity. She thought the apron I wore was a costume of defeat. She didn't understand that it was armor. Every table I waited, every shift I picked up, every dollar I saved was a brick in the fortress I was building to protect myself from her. The embarrassment wasn't mine to carry. It never was. The shame belonged to the woman who stole her daughter's future to buy a luxury car. It belonged to the sister who built a brand on lies and looked down on the very people who keep the world running. I carried their shame for so long thinking it was my own heavyweight, but tonight I set it down. I left it in that conference room along with the signed confession. This journey has taught me a hard lesson, one that I want to share with you because I know I am not the only one who has walked this lonely path. We are taught from the moment we are born that family is everything. We are told that blood is thicker than water, that we owe our parents our loyalty, simply because they gave us life. We are conditioned to forgive the unforgivable just to keep the peace at holiday dinners. But I am here to tell you that is a lie. Biology is just a biological process. It is a lottery. But family is not a noun. It is a verb. Family is an act of doing. Family is showing up. Family is respecting boundaries. Family is the people who celebrate your victories without jealousy and hold you through your defeats without judgment. My mother gave me DNA, but she did not give me a family. I realized that when I found my father's journal. I realized it when Liam stood by me in that boardroom risking his own reputation to help me find justice. I realized it when I looked at the waitress who served me coffee this morning and felt more kinship with her than I ever did with the people who shared my last name. Do not let anyone, not even your mother, tell you that you are a disappointment because you are walking a path they don't understand. Do not let them call you a failure because you are working a job they think is beneath them. There is no shame in honest work. There is only shame in exploitation. There is only shame in using people. If you are the scapegoat in your family, if you are the one they blame when things go wrong, if you are the one they call only when they need money or a favor, I want you to listen to me closely. You are not crazy. You are not overly sensitive. You are not difficult. You are simply a person who has decided to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. And that terrifies them, because when you stop playing your role in their dysfunction, they have to face the darkness in themselves. It is scary to walk away. It is terrifying to cut the cord. There will be days when you feel guilty. There will be days when you miss the illusion of what you wanted them to be. I know I will. I will miss the idea of having a mother to call on Sundays. I will miss the fantasy of having a sister to be my bridesmaid. But I will not miss the pain. I will not miss the manipulation. I will not miss the feeling of being an ATM machine with a heartbeat. I have evicted them from my life. I have reclaimed the real estate of my mind. And just like the building I now own, my heart is under new management. The rules here are different now. Respect is the rent you pay to stay in my life. Honesty is the key to the front door. And if you cannot afford that currency, then you cannot live here. I look out at the skyline one last time. The city is awake, alive with possibility. Somewhere out there, there is a 14-year-old girl sitting in the dark because her mother didn't pay the electric bill. Somewhere there is a student staring at a tuition bill she can't pay. Somewhere there is a woman being told she isn't enough. I am telling this story for you. I fought this war so you would know that it is possible to win. You can survive the betrayal. You can rebuild from the rubble. You can be your own hero. I am Sarah Jenkins. I was a waitress. I was a disappointment. I was the black sheep. But today I am the landlord. I am the owner of my destiny. And the view from here is spectacular. If my story has touched something in you, if it has given you a spark of courage to face the giants in your own life, I ask you to do one thing for me. Go to the comments section right now and type the word strong. Type it for yourself. Type it as a declaration. Type it to let the world know that you are still standing despite everything they threw at you. Let's fill the comments with that word until it drowns out the negativity. Let's create a wall of strength that no one can tear down. And please, if you believe that women should never bow down to disrespect, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it helps this message reach the people who need it most. Subscribe to this channel if you want to be part of a community that values truth over appearances. I will be sharing more stories, more lessons, and more truth in the weeks to come. We are building something real here, and I want you to be a part of it. You are worthy. You are valuable. And you are enough exactly as you are. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. I am Sarah, and this has been my story. I am signing off now to go live the rest of it. Goodbye, and stay strong.